So the state of baseball is something that we're always considering as writers for ESPN.com. So I'm here today with Tim Kurkjian, Buster Olney, and Jeff Passan to talk about where baseball is, especially now that we're a little over a month into the season. And just to start off, I guess, we're starting to see this kind of new generation of young stars coming to the game. It was a big topic of conversation coming into the season, guys. And so I'm curious, just generally, how you guys have felt so far now that we are a month into the season about the progress that we've seen from guys like Fernando Tatis Jr., Juan Soto, and also just generally about where you guys see kind of the future of the game going as we're kind of starting to see Major League Baseball center those guys around the marketing campaign and pushing the sport forward in terms of trying to get the sport to appeal to more younger folks.
Baseball's in a great spot right now. They got a ton of great young players that they can market. Tatis Jr. is obviously someone who's drawn a lot of eyes. We've seen that in the ratings we've had this year. Ronald Acuna Jr. has been absolutely amazing. Juan Soto, when he's been on the field the last few years, he's been tremendous. So they're in a great spot. But I do think that when you talk to folks around the game, they're really unhappy with the product generally, and they feel like they need to do things to make it better.
I feel like there's this gap right now too between the product that we're seeing on the field and kind of the excitement I think that we have around this young generation of players, because I think, at least from my vantage point, this is the most excited I've been about a group of young players in baseball in quite a long time. And the product on the field right now is just, it's so, one-sided towards strikeouts as a whole. Tim, I mean, what have you kind of seen so far this year, and in terms of just how you've seen the product evolve, and also just what your perspective on the young stars that we are seeing in the game?
Well, I have never in 41 years of covering baseball seen this kind of influx of great young players over the last 10 years. It basically started with Trout and Harper, and every year we have more guys coming in that you just shake your head and say, I can't believe how good this guy is. I can't believe how big and strong this guy is. And it's not just Tatis Jr., it's Acuna Jr., it's Juan Soto. They are everywhere. We've never seen anything like the last 10 years. So Buster's right. Now is the perfect time to seize this, because we've never seen anything quite like this. And yet we keep trying to market players like we try to market basketball players. And I'm sorry, there's a difference there. LeBron touches the ball on every possession. You can go watch him, and when he has a bad night, he gets 19 points, 8 rebounds, and 6 assists, and does 3 things you'll never forget. But a baseball player, you go see him for one night, he might go 0 for 4 and strike out 3 times, and you go home saying, I don't see the big deal about this guy. That's the difference. I just don't think you can market a baseball player quite as easily as you can a basketball player who's going to do something spectacular every night because of the athletic nature of that game. But the difficulty of baseball sometimes prevents a great player from looking like a great player every night.
The marketing, though, I think the interesting thing, Tim, is that marketing, it's going away from the idea that if you go and look at Fernando Tatis Jr. on a specific night, you are bound to see something spectacular or special. It's about ubiquity in the public sphere. It's about seeing his face on T-shirts. It's about seeing him on social media. It's about all the other ancillary things outside of the ballpark, because what he's doing inside the stadium, while night after night it may not be the most amazing thing, in summation it's pretty incredible. And the fact that Tatis and Soto and Acuna and Trout and all of these other players can stand out in this environment of mediocre baseball that we're seeing right now, I think really speaks to the power that they do have if the game is able to evolve and to capture those fans who are just yearning for players to look after on a daily basis and a game that can match it. Because right now, those individual stars almost seem like they are better than the game itself.
And Joon, can I just jump in real quick too? For years I've always heard the narrative that the Player Association players sometimes are not willing to participate. I completely disagree. Look, and have had that experience. This year we've been doing these, for example, these rapid fire interviews for Sunday Night Baseball. And Lindor said yes. And Tim Anderson said yes. And Bryce Harper said yes. And Acuna Jr. said yes. Machado said yes. All of these guys are ready to pitch in. We've seen that with Mike's on the field in recent years. They've been terrific, but it does feel like at some point there needs to be collaborative, cooperative effort between Major League Baseball and the Players Association. And let's face it, that's not going to happen until they get the next CBA in place, and maybe that conversation can move forward.
I wonder, just because I think the baseball's relationship with social media, I think just as a culture, has really changed dramatically over the last 5 years or so, where, I've talked to guys who talked about when they came up in the major leagues, a lot of guys in the clubhouse would be like, why are you posting on social media? You're making it about yourself. It's not, it's about the team. And I think there's been kind of a shift where veterans now understand, oh, it's really important for our sport and our players to be out on social media. So do you think that guys being willing to kind of do these like Zoom rapid fire interviews as a result of, and they're willing to do as a result of kind of a shift in kind of baseball talking about how they need to put themselves out there? I think that's a conversation that's happening the last decade or so.
There's no question about it. The culture of baseball is changing. And I think for years, and I think Tim would back me up on this, the expectation of failure in baseball really shaped the culture. In other words, you don't trust success. The best hitters make out 7 out of 10 times. So if you do have a good game, you don't talk about it. You don't promote yourself. That's changed now. And I think that we are seeing players on social media stepping out and being more comfortable when idiots like me say, hey, can you come on and, do 90 seconds on Sunday Night Baseball with me?
Tim, I'm curious, just from your vantage point, like how have you seen the culture of baseball evolve as it's adapted to the age of the internet? Because I feel like that is kind of the thread line through all of this about how baseball's culture has needed to change.
Yes, our players are so much more worldly. They're so much more in tune with how the world works today than baseball players when I first started covering in 1979. All those guys did, and this is not a criticism, is they played baseball and they didn't know much else about what was going on. I mean, famously, different sport, Larry Bird went on the bus with the Celtics once. Dan Shaughnessy was on the bus, and Larry Bird, who's like the greatest player ever, did not know who Bruce Springsteen was. And Dan Shaughnessy had to say, Larry, he's the you of rock and roll. The thought that a player today wouldn't understand what pop culture is all about, they all know that stuff. They're all so far beyond baseball. They all get it, and it's really good. This is another way we can market them, is they're so much cooler in a way than the baseball players of 40, 45 years ago.
Yeah, and June, part of me wonders whether the next generation of players has so embraced the mantle of marketing baseball that maybe the onus isn't going to be on Major League Baseball anymore. We've all seen the ability for an individual to take his or her brand and make it into something bigger. And if players are emboldened, if they are supported by Major League Baseball, maybe it's the players who take the wheel for this car that's been driving off the road for all these years now and steer it back straight and get it back on a line. Because the players who do embrace this, the players who do want it, I think are becoming more and more common.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point too, just because I think at least 7 years ago, it felt like Mike Trout and Bryce Harper kind of put on this mantle for Major League Baseball, be like, here are the guys for this generation. And it feels like over the last few years or so, especially with kind of social media becoming a bigger part of the game, you're seeing guys like Mookie, Fernando Tatis Jr., Francisco Lindor, guys who are willing to put themselves out there first and kind of letting the crowd of baseball fans decide, oh, here are the people that we resonate with. And it seems like MLB is kind of following the tide as to, which players are kind of fans are being drawn to in the first place.
And I think that the Players Association leadership is behind as well. I mean, think about what happened with Trevor Bauer this spring when he had that situation. He got the letter from Major League Baseball and he posted it and he kind of went after Major League Baseball. And when I saw that, I was like, Trevor, that's your union leadership too. All these rules that are in place were negotiated by the people who work for you. And so it'll be interesting to see as we go forward if players like Trevor Bauer begin to drive that conversation, because he seems to have great instincts in terms of how to market the players in a way that, as Tim was saying, years ago, players they'd be sitting in front of their locker building up walls because they didn't want anybody to see them.
Yeah, Buster, MLB isn't the one who said, let the kids play. The kids said, we want to play. And MLB was dad who just got tired of saying, no, okay, go play. Go have fun. We'll support you, child. Just please don't get in fights, and please don't take this too far. And they're still figuring out exactly what that line is and exactly where that balance is.
All right, so the youth of baseball is not the only story that's happening right now. There's also been an enormous number of strikeouts so far this season, a record-setting amount, and we're starting to see just discussions about pitchers being so far ahead of hitters in a way that I think we haven't seen before. And so you guys have obviously seen the game change more than I have. And so I'm curious, what has been your perspective on how you've seen the game change over the course of the last 10 years, especially as we've seen kind of the influx of kind of the 3 outcome game and launch angle and the introduction of video as such a main thing. Tim, we can start with you.
Yeah, I must say I'm a little bit worried right now where the game is. As we all know, there were 1,092 more strikeouts than hits in the month of April. We've never had a month like that in Major League history. And routinely, I watch a big league pitcher, whether it's Cole or DeGrom or Bieber or Corbin Burns, and I wonder, how does anybody ever get a hit off of these guys? That's how good the stuff is. And when our best pitchers locate, the hitter basically has no chance to get a hit. And that is not very healthy. Last year, the Reds had more walks than singles. That's never happened to any team in a full season, even though that wasn't a full season. This year, we've already had 2 games in which there were 6 hits total by the 2 teams and at least 30 strikeouts. 2. We've only had 4 in the history of baseball. We've already had 40 times that a hitter has struck out at least 4 times in a game. Okay, Bill Buckner and Mike Scioscia, different era, I get it, never struck out 3 times, and 40 times already has a hitter struck out 4 times. That's where we are. The stuff the pitchers have today is so amazingly good, so violent, and they don't even have to throw their fastball because their secondary pitches are so good. And my worry is that we've lost the value of the hit. We're all trying to get the ball up in the air. We are being taught by the clubs, get the ball up in the air. And in trying to do that, you strike out all the time. You don't put the ball in play. And yet, to make the adjustment and tell a hitter tonight, hey, we want you to hit it the other way tonight. We want you to put it in play against Max Scherzer. Good luck. They've never been trained to do that. It's going to get even worse if they try to make the adjustment right now in season. So this adjustment, to me at least, has to start in the batting cages of literally 10-year-old kids. And we start to change the way they approach their approach at the game. Otherwise, we're going to have a lot more 6-hit, 30 strikeout games.
Yeah, I mean, even just 10 years ago or so, it felt like a pitcher coming up with a 99-mile-per-hour fastball was a huge deal. And now, like, Joe Schmo in AAA comes up and nobody's ever heard of him, and he throws 100 miles per hour.
I've been talking about this for a few years. They have to restore the preeminence of starting pitchers, and which not only potentially could give hitters more of a chance, but we talked about the marketing of the sport. I mean, for years and years and years, starting pitchers were the Hulk Hogans of the sport. You know, they were the Andre the Giants of the sport, and the game needs that. You just mentioned, like, these nameless, faceless relievers, paraded them going out every night, throwing 100 miles per hour. That's part of the reason why people around the sport complain about the product.
Look at the way that we're celebrating Jacob deGrom and Garrett Cole and Shane Bieber and Corbin Burns, 49 strikeouts to 0 walks. That right there, I think, Buster, illustrates your point. And it's why, of all the rule changes that Major League Baseball is trying to embrace, the one that I really do wonder if it could solve a number of problems is limiting the number of pitchers on a particular staff. And I'm genuinely curious to see what you guys think about this, because every time I talk about it with someone, their initial instinct is, oh, okay. And I hear someone really pick apart this idea. But if you limit pitchers on a particular staff to 10 or 11, all of a sudden, the ability to go and throw 5 relievers a night and have this clown car of bullpen relievers coming in, it goes away. If you incentivize starting pitchers to go deeper into games, which they are going to have to do if you have a shorter staff, all of a sudden the max effort pitches that we see when they're going up to 100 simply are not going to be there anymore. I think velocity naturally is going to go down if starters understand that they have to go deeper into games. If velocity goes down, all of a sudden strikeouts go down, because those two things are extremely well correlated and have proven so for a long time. Further, the more balls in play that you get, the more action that you have. And the beauty of baseball players today is not just in their ability to hit balls a really long way or to square up these insane pitches that we're seeing, it's the athleticism too. And the more balls in play that you have, the more athleticism and great defensive plays you can see in the field. I listen, I don't want to think that I have the panacea to all of baseball's problems here, but it feels like many birds are killed with this one stone. If they do try and implement it, it's something that would take a half decade to do, to build pitchers up at lower levels, to understand in college that you're going to need to go 110 or 120 pitches as opposed to the 100 that you're expected to now. But that's something that the arm can take on, because the fact is, guys, as pitch counts have gone down, arm injuries have not. So those two things are not correlated the way that I think people thought they were.
Jeff, I'll pretend I've got the panacea, okay? I would agree with you on this. I wouldn't do it for 10 pitchers on a staff per night, because I think that gives teams, as you know, the flexibility.
Buster, not 10 per night. I mean like 10 at a time, and you have to stay on a roster unless there is an actual injured listable injury. You can't have the train going between AAA and the big leagues, because that would really throw the whole thing out.
My solution would be managers limited to either 4 or 5 pitchers for a given 9 innings, with obvious exceptions for injuries and blowouts. And that way, if your Terry Francona is sitting in the dugout, you know that you want to get Shane Bieber third time through the lineup to give you more flexibility with the relievers late in the game. I totally agree with you. Yeah, you have to stop the parade of relievers, because they don't inspire fans. Like, I've got my focus group of 1, my 16-year-old son. He's not going to watch that. On the other hand, if he knows that, you have a DeGrom going out there on a given night, or his favorite team, Max Fried, he's going to watch that.
Yeah, I did a Phillies game 2 years ago. Granted, it was in September when there were still 40-man rosters. So I asked Gabe Kapler, how does your bullpen look for tonight? And he said, very seriously, we have 17 guys available in the bullpen. 17 guys available in the bullpen. And he used like 10 of them. We cannot have that. I'm with you guys. We need to limit the number of pitchers, and we need to challenge our starting pitchers to go longer, because you know what? Most of them would say, give it to me longer.
Yes.
Tired of coming out after 6. Blake Snell wasn't an isolated incident coming out after 73 and being angry about it. Half of the guys would rather go much longer, but we have conditioned them to think 6 innings, 100 pitches, I'm out of there, where most of them would say, I want another inning. I want to finish this game. Max Scherzer pitched a complete game the other night and shook hands with the catcher. Is that not the way it's supposed to be for an elite starting pitcher? That's the way it was when I grew up a million years ago.
And like Tim, here's the thing. You, me, Buster, like we're all like the previous generation. So I don't want us trying to sound like things in baseball were better way back when, because a lot of the things that are happening in baseball right now are extraordinarily good and are exciting. But the way that analytics has gone, I think it has helped the game in 1,000 different regards, but the desire for efficiency and the understanding that the easiest way to win a baseball game may be by bringing in that parade of relievers just does not dovetail with a great brand of baseball for the fan. And what we're looking for here, I think, and what we're going to try and figure out with the series is what's the right balance between what's best for the fan and what's best for the game, and where those two meet.
And Joon, one punctuation on that real quick, following up on Jeff.
Sure.
Jeff, what Jeff just said is what you hear from people in front offices all over baseball. They created this Frankenstein, and privately they're like, oh my God, this is awful to watch. They hate it.
The exciting part of this whole conversation to me is the fact that we're nitpicking large parts of the game, and yet all of us tune in on a nightly basis and still love baseball. this is something that can be rescued. And if it does, Bud Selig threw around the words golden era as much as like a marketing term as anything, and a little like, patting myself on the back. I really do believe that if baseball gets itself in the right place with a few rule changes, that because of the great players that are there these days, and because of their ability to go out and sell the game, that baseball has a chance to really, really explode in the coming years. And I don't know if it's ever going to be the national pastime again, but in terms of regaining market share among the common sports fan, I think that's genuinely a reality and something that is well within the game's ability.
Jeff, I'm going to nominate you. What you said is exactly right. The sport has a chance to explode in growth with all these great players, but I need you to be the merits counselor for the Players Association in Major League Baseball. It's not going to move forward.
Buster, you could not pay me enough to try and take that job on. I sit here and I watch them, and I'm the chronicler of these things. But the idea of a mediator, no thank you. We will let them work out their problems on their own, and we may well be sitting here for a couple months without baseball because of it. But I'd like to think that both sides understand that the golden opportunity that is in front of them right now is not worth petty grievances, differences, and what amounts to, listen, I'm not going to shrug off hundreds of millions of dollars. It's a lot of money, but Major League Baseball especially, they don't want to kill the golden goose, because the owners are going to be around a lot longer than the players. And they have to understand that if their investment is going to be as good long-term as it is right now, or even better long-term, that they need to invest in the future as much as they do the present.
So just as we would have hoped that they would not execute a labor war in the middle of a pandemic. Okay.
I feel like this is just generally the existential crisis facing baseball right now, because we've seen the labor tensions now go public in a way that we haven't seen before. Players being willing to use social media to push back against the owners in a way that we haven't seen in generations past. I'm curious, just all three of you, how you feel about the CBA negotiations looming, especially given that we have this incredible young group of players that, marketed the right way, probably could explode the growth of the sport. But, as we all know, MLB has a tendency to fumble the bag and drop all of its opportunities when it's right there in front of them.
Yeah, June, I'm worried like everybody else about where this next CBA is going. I covered the 81 strike. That was the most brutal experience I've ever had as a journalist. It was so difficult. 94 wasn't a whole lot easier, believe me. And this is going to be bad if after 2 COVID-affected seasons, we have a work stoppage of some sort next year. And my concern is the players feel like they got beaten on the last CBA, so they're going to do whatever it takes to even that score. I had a former player tell me about the last CBA. He said, we got a contract with Whole Foods and the owners got a salary cap. That doesn't sound like a real commensurate agreement there. So that's my concern, is the players feel like we got to get back this year. And I'm not sure that's the way to go about it if we're going to get an agreement.